The police had searched the house more than once. They checked the doors, the windows, the basement, and every room. But they never checked the space above the closet. For almost 9 months, a man had been living there in the dark, listening to the widow move through the house below him. Tonight, we are opening 3 files about people who believed they were home alone. One is a documented historical case. The other 2 are original dramatizations. Each file is labeled before it begins. File 1. Documented case. The man above the closet. In the autumn of 1941, Philip Peters was living alone in a modest house on West Moncrief Place in Denver, Colorado. Philip was 73 years old and retired from the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad. He was known around the neighborhood as a quiet man and a musician. He and his wife, Helen, had been members of a local guitar club and sometimes gave lessons together. But during those weeks, Helen was not at home. She had broken her hip and was recovering in a hospital. The neighbors knew Philip was alone, so they began inviting him to dinner. He would spend the evening with them, take a plate of leftovers home, and return to his empty house. What none of them knew was that the house was not empty. Several weeks earlier, a man named Theodore Conies had come to the Peters home looking for help. Conies had known Philip through the guitar club. He was in poor health, often homeless, and desperate for food. When nobody answered the door, he broke in. Inside, he found food. He also found a small opening above a closet that led into an attic space so narrow that most people would never have considered it a room. Conies climbed into it anyway. From that point on, he lived above Philip's home without Philip knowing. When the house was quiet, Conies would climb down. He took food from the kitchen and used the rooms below, then returned to the opening before Philip came back. On October 17th, Philip arrived home and found Conies near the refrigerator. The 2 men struggled. Conies grabbed a heavy iron tool from the stove and struck Philip. By the time the neighbors came looking for him, Philip was dead. Police searched the house. They looked for a forced window, an open door, or some path the killer could have used to escape. They found nothing. Theodore Conies had not escaped. He had climbed back into the attic. After Helen was released from the hospital, she returned to the same house as a widow. A friend moved in to help her. Soon, the women began noticing small things. Food disappeared from the kitchen. Objects were not where they had been left. At night, the house made sounds that did not resemble settling wood or water pipes. The friend became convinced the house was haunted. Eventually, she refused to stay there. Helen also left, moving away to live with her son. The home on West Moncrief Place stood vacant. But neighbors continued reporting noises. Police returned to the property, sometimes arriving quickly enough that they believed they would catch whoever was inside. Each time, the rooms were empty. In July of 1942, 2 detectives watched the house from outside. They saw movement through a window and rushed in. Again, the rooms appeared deserted. Then, they heard something upstairs. The detectives opened a closet and saw a pair of legs disappearing through a small opening above them. They grabbed the man and pulled him down. It was Theodore Conies. Inside the attic, police found the cramped space where he had been living. The smell was so severe that one of the officers became sick. The space was barely large enough for a person to remain inside. An officer later remarked that a man would have to be a spider to tolerate it. The newspapers gave Conies a name that followed him for the rest of his life: the Denver Spiderman. Conies confessed and was convicted of Philip Peters' murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. But the most disturbing part of the case is not how he was caught. It is the months before that moment. Helen Peters slept inside the same house where her husband had been killed. She heard things moving above her. She watched food disappear and objects change position. And every time the house became quiet, the man responsible was only a few feet away, waiting above the closet. File 2. Original fiction. The Utility Worker. Maya was 24 when her parents left her alone in their house for a winter weekend. She had lived there most of her life, and being alone did not bother her. The neighborhood was quiet, the doors had recently been replaced, and a camera covered the front porch. At 1:47 on Saturday morning, her phone vibrated. The doorbell camera had detected a person. The recording showed a man standing at the edge of the porch. He wore a reflective utility jacket and carried a small flashlight. He did not ring the bell. For almost 30 seconds, he stood completely still, looking at the front windows. Then he stepped closer and reached toward the camera. The image tilted upward until it showed only the porch ceiling. Maya turned off the television and listened. A few seconds later, someone knocked. The man announced that he was checking a possible gas leak in the area. He said Maya needed to open the door immediately. She spoke through the door without unlocking it. She told him she would call the utility company to confirm. There was no answer. When she looked through the side window, the porch was empty. Maya called the emergency number printed on the family's gas bill. The operator checked the address and told her there was no reported leak and no crew working in the neighborhood. While the operator was still speaking, Maya heard the wooden gate beside the garage swing open. She moved away from the windows and called 911. The dispatcher told her to go upstairs, lock herself in a room, and stay on the line. Maya entered her parents' bedroom and pushed a chair beneath the handle. From the window, she could see a white van parked across the street with its lights off. The man was no longer outside. Then the garage door began to rise. It moved only a few inches at first, stopped, and then continued upward. Maya remembered that the interior door between the garage and kitchen was often left unlocked during the day. She heard the garage door close again. The house became silent. For almost a minute, the dispatcher said nothing except that officers were approaching. Then a floorboard creaked below Maya. Another creak came from the staircase. The footsteps were slow. Whoever had entered was attempting to move quietly, but the house was old, and Maya knew the sound of every step. The person reached the upstairs hallway. The bedroom handle moved once. It stopped. Then it turned slowly until the chair pressed against the door. Maya covered her mouth so the dispatcher would not hear her breathing and repeat something through the phone. The handle released. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the man whispered, "I know you're in there." Red and blue light suddenly flashed across the bedroom wall. The man ran. Officers found him behind the garage, attempting to climb over the fence. The reflective jacket was not connected to any utility company. In his van, police found several pieces of equipment, gloves, and printed property listings for houses in the area. Maya later learned that 2 nearby homes had been entered during weekends when their owners were away. The investigators believed the man had watched the neighborhood long enough to learn which houses were empty. He had made only one mistake. He saw Maya's parents leave. He did not see Maya stay behind. File 3. Original fiction. The Owner Code. Sarah traveled for work several times a month and usually preferred small rental homes to hotels. The house she booked outside Columbus looked ordinary. 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a back porch facing a line of trees. Check-in was entirely automated. The host sent her a 4-digit code for the front door and explained that it would expire after checkout. On the first night, Sarah noticed a second entry in the smart lock application. Her code was listed as guest. Below it was another code labeled owner. She did not think much about it. At 2:16 in the morning, the lock application made a soft chime. The notification read, "Front door unlocked. Owner code." Sarah sat up and stared toward the bedroom doorway. She heard nothing. She opened her message thread with the host and typed that someone had just used the owner code. The host replied almost immediately, "No one should be at the property." Sarah asked whether a cleaner or maintenance worker could have entered by mistake. The host answered with a single word, "No." From the living room came the soft click of the front door closing. Sarah called 911 and whispered the address. The dispatcher told her not to confront whoever had entered. The bedroom had no lock. Sarah looked for somewhere to hide and noticed a narrow laundry closet beside the bathroom. She stepped inside, pulled the folding door almost shut, crouched behind a stack of towels. Footsteps crossed the living room. They did not sound confused. The person moved slowly, pausing between rooms as though he already knew the layout. The bedroom door opened. For several seconds, Sarah heard nothing but fabric moving and drawers sliding. Then the footsteps entered the bathroom. A beam of light passed through the slats of the laundry door. Sarah held the phone against her chest. The dispatcher had muted her side of the call and instructed her to remain silent. The beam disappeared. The footsteps moved back toward the kitchen. Sarah began to believe the person was leaving. Then the laundry door shifted. The handle moved less than an inch and stopped. Someone was standing directly outside. Sarah could see the toes of a pair of dark work boots beneath the door. They remained there for so long that her legs began to shake. Then a man's voice said quietly, "You're not supposed to be here tonight." The laundry door started to fold open. Before the gap became wide enough for him to see inside, someone pounded on the front door and shouted, "Police!" The boots vanished. Officers entered and arrested a man attempting to leave through the back porch. He was not the owner. He was a former property manager who had been dismissed several months earlier. The host had changed the guest code after every booking, but had never removed the old management code from the lock. Police found a small camera in the man's bag and several objects later identified as belongings left behind by previous guests. The host refunded Sarah and removed the listing. What stayed with her was how confidently the man had entered. He had not knocked. He had not forced a window or broken a lock. The application had announced him as though he belonged there, and if Sarah had fallen asleep 20 minutes earlier, she might never have seen the notification. Those were tonight's 3 files. Until the next file, check the locks and listen carefully to the space above you.